this is a really confusing space, this whole indirect world of video monetization. I mean, display's sort of, settled down because it's a bit mature of a marketplace.
Sort of. There's still a long way to go.
Yeah. So, I mean, where are we right now in this exchange-driven kind of ecosystem? At a point in time, would you say, are we nascent? Is it emerging?
So, conveniently for me, if it wasn't confusing, I don't think I'd have a job. So there's lots for me to do from an educational standpoint in the ecosystem, and I really enjoy that. I have an agency trading desk background. I worked at an agency for a long time. When I started hearing about the whole exchange space, I thought, wow, this feels like the future for display advertising. More intelligent, more transparent, more granular. And it's been really exciting to watch it develop over the last few years. I went from being kind of I want to do this kind of person to watching it mature, watching the sort of pain that marketers and agencies and publishers were going through, to now being able to think about it from a very, I don't want to say theoretical, but I have a much different perspective now that I'm at Forrester. I have a much broader perspective than I ever did before. It's still early days. I mean, I know it feels like those of us that go to the ad exchanger conferences and talk every day about exchange traded spending and how that's trending, feel like, oh man, this is where we've been there, we've done that, it's here, it's arrived. For a lot of marketers, it really hasn't yet, So there's still a lot of opportunity for education. There's still a pretty big lack of understanding in the market, I'd say. People see the Terry Kawaja Lumascape and they still want me to explain that to them, and I say, no, that's not the point.
Or stick a pen in their eye.
I know.
Which would be my option, actually.
Yeah, mostly I tell them to throw it out the window. Yeah. That's about mergers and acquisitions. That's not about solving problems, per se. I say, no. Don't look at that. Let's talk about the concepts that matter. Let's talk about what we mean by ad exchange, what we mean by real-time bidding, which, by the way, isn't necessarily the same thing.
Right.
What we mean by programmatic,
So, I mean, we're seeing, like, the numbers I've heard, anywhere from like 17 to 20% lift in a per impression value in display when sold through a programmatic platform instead of like an ad network, for example, right? I mean, video's early. So there's that incentive to actually, because we don't have excess inventory, to start delivering through machine-to-machine channels is not there. Where do you see video going in regards to exchange-based buying, programmatic buying? Yeah. When is it really going to become a tent pole sales channel? And how is it going to mature in comparison to how display is matured, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, so the reality is that publishers always want to get as much for every impression as they can, and buyers want to get the impression as efficiently as they can. So that tension's not going to go away. I think what needs to happen is that both parties need to recognize that the more intelligence that they bring to the table from their side, probably the better that they can do in this ecosystem. I think that the publishers aren't really there yet. With that part of the equation. So they have a long way to go in understanding the audience that they have and that they can sell, in understanding yield maximization across all of the different sales channels, in understanding and really recognizing that buyers are wanting to do things in totally new ways and they need to get on the bus. So if a publisher is thinking of it as ad exchange, indirect, remnant, I think they're thinking about it the wrong way. I think the bigger opportunity is around programmatic, which literally could simply mean, a relationship created at the beginning of the year that's very strategic, and that is then transacted in a moment-to-moment, environment in real time. And so I actually think a lot of video will become programmatic, but publishers, I think they're just afraid. They're afraid to give up the perceived lack of control in that environment.
So it's interesting, right? Because when we talk about programmatic buying, I mean, we're talking about things like business rules, driving buying decision making, and that's resulted in a lot of changes on the media agency side of the house, right? And I know you've done a lot of kind of deconstruction and thinking around that. And tell me a little about your thoughts there.
Yeah, I mean, people like to pick on agencies. Sometimes I like to pick on agencies, but I do it with love because I worked at an agency for, I don't know, on and off for 10 years. There's a lot of transformation that's happening. Change is hard for people, and so I think there are a lot of people that are resistant because it feels threatening, and then there are some people that are really lean in, that are sort of trying to change the way things are done. So it's going to take some time. You see agencies trying to figure it out. The rise of the holding company trading desk was kind of a first step. And what I like about that model is it creates this sort of sense of we have a center of excellence. We have people that are leaning into this, figuring it out, making sense of it, helping me as an agency person, make this happen for my client. I think over time, as programmatic becomes more the norm, you will see the agencies really start to evolve the way that they're organized. Programmatic experts on one side, custom brand experience experts on the other side, working together with a layer of strategy over top. But it's painful, I think, right now for a lot of agencies, especially as they try and figure out holding company, trading desk, internal trading desk. Clients are saying, why do I need to use your trading desk? It's right. They're trying to figure it out.
So, the sort of catalyst for a large catalyst for display exchanges were elimination of redundancy and kind of universal frequency capping. And video is interesting because I've heard a lot about it maturing in that it's moving video up funnel, right? It's about DMPs are enabling audience management and buying sort of reach frequency instead of necessarily on a performance basis, a lot like display. How do you foresee video unfolding as it matures?
That's funny. I wouldn't have thought as video ever really being too much of a down funnel activity. I've always thought about it as a beautiful brand medium. It's sight, sound, motion. It's something that brands understand just intuitively. Having television commercials that they get so excited about creating. So, you're making me think about that.
Well, but it's the same challenge. If we to get this side of the chasm, which is linear TV, right? The idea of making television addressable.
Right. I think of video, so I would think about video this way. It is yet another step in the journey that a consumer takes to make a decision, right? So I prefer not to think about, video versus display versus mobile versus social versus addressable television. I would much rather see a world where it's about the person, just to mirror something Stephanie was talking about. I talk a lot about the move from media-centric buying to audience-centric buying. And so then video can literally be a step in that journey where the user sees a video and then they see 2 display ads and then maybe they interact with an ad on Facebook and then they get something on their mobile device and then they make a purchase decision.
Right.
So part of a journey.
So I think that's the obligation that we have as an industry to make that fluid and and easy and gentle, right? But let's take the publisher hat now, right? Yep. We have the emergence of video-only exchanges, mobile-only exchanges. We have the displays, right? Right now, all the SSPs are mostly just display. The sort of 3 big guys are really only display focused. Yep. Do you see that we're going to be in a world for a period of time where, a publisher, if they decide to leverage programmatic buying across their inventory, they have one partner for display, one partner for video? Like, when are we going to get to a place where there's ubiquity and it's easy for a publisher?
Yeah. It's something I'm thinking a lot about. I represent, explicitly I represent the buy side, right? I write for marketers and agencies, but you can't ignore the other side of that coin. And so increasingly I'm spending time talking to publishers about these very things. And it's amazing the variance in sophistication with publishers. There are some like ESPN, who are super lean forward, who are thinking about totally different ways of packaging. Weather is another great example. Hiring folks that completely understand programmatic, thinking about packaging across screens in new ways. And then there's some, print publications are a good example, that are really struggling, to adapt to this new world. And complexity is a big part of it. But before you even think about technology complexity, you have to make the decision fundamentally that you want to be, a multi-screen company, that you want to sell in that way, and that you have people that can speak that language. Then the technology is there just as an enabler. To really answer your question, though, yeah, point solutions are annoying. They just are, right? And the ecosystem's really fragmented, just like it is on the buy side. So if you ask a publisher, do you wish that you had a single system that allowed you to do all of the things that you needed to do? Generally, the universal answer is yes. But the other half of the answer, and again on the buy side too, is, but I need flexibility. I need it to be open, because there will always be new things that are going to be happening, and I need to be able to respond to those new things by plugging it right into the system that I'm using. So yes, I want it, but I also want the cake, but I also want to be able to eat
right.
it.
So given your sort of your focus and orientation on the demand side, let's talk about the dynamic between the agency trading desks, private exchanges, and then DSPs, right?
Sure.
Because in some respect, there's the value of a DSP theoretically is to connect a buyer to as much supply as possible,
sure.
right? But you have this proliferation at the holding company level of the request and requirement of private exchanges and things like that. Where is it all going to settle out?
Yeah. So, you know, I have a fairly public set of opinions about holding company trading desks, and I think maybe they get misconstrued, so I'll try and explain it. I think that the centralized framework for service probably doesn't last forever, and you start to see decentralization of service, the pulling of the levers inside of a DSP, for example, down toward the agency level, because the agencies need to understand and adapt to the changing environment. They can't just let somebody else worry about it. They need to learn how to do those things. But keeping things like publisher negotiations, technology negotiations, data relationships at the center, I could actually see how that would be fairly valuable, you know, when you're taking all of the consolidated spend of a WPP, for example, and using that in a publisher relationship. You know, one of the mistakes I think publishers have made has been putting the junior sales guy into that negotiation. A big mistake. You know, you don't want to put a junior sales guy in front of, you know, a Brian Lesser from Xaxis. I mean, you want your really, really savvy, sophisticated.
Shoot on like a steak? Sort of, is that like where we're going with this?
I mean, you really want your most sophisticated, savvy sales guy who can have a very strategic discussion, you know, in the room with that buyer.
Right.
I mean, more of that is happening. I mean, there's a lot of hype, I think, around the private exchange, and exchange is even a misnomer. The private marketplace model. It's the right direction for us to be going, at least in terms of big buyers making deals with big sellers. But it's so early. It's such early days.
Okay, so I'm going to sort of ask a question, but obviously express an opinion here. So marketplace.
Is it really a question then?
Well, it is. No,
okay.
Because a marketplace, if you look at, you know, my first life was finance, you know,
yep.
It's the place where the supply and the demand curve intersect,
yep.
and it's, you know, there's transparency and open information, et cetera. And the reality is that there's not that in the marketplaces we're talking about.
I agree.
We have price floors that aren't visible.
I agree.
You know, I mean, you know, the parameters around trades and actions, like, it's not transparent, right? It's really just trying to make things more efficient in some respects.
I mean, I think it's pretty funny actually, because I was very into this idea initially of the exchange model in its very perfect form, where the laws of supply and demand really dictated price, and you know,
right?
No, really, like, but again, it was theoretical.
Yeah.
As it turns out, human beings are involved, and when you're talking about a market where human beings are involved, there's always somebody that's trying to make a back office deal with somebody else. And that's what a private marketplace is. I mean, I get why it's a good thing, theoretically. If you're a really big buyer, you want to use your buying clout to get a really good deal. But it's not, again, it's not an open marketplace where there's a bunch of people bidding for a bunch of inventory from a bunch of different publishers.
Right.
It's literally just a more automated transactional mechanism that is a direct sale.
The one thing we sort of haven't talked about yet, but we can't avoid, because it is the epicenter of this whole meat, you know, ecosystem, is data and DMPs, right? And how that powers this and makes it all possible.
Sure.
Whether it's on the demand side, you know, making the ROI greater on the buy, or the supply side actually making the inventory more valuable.
Yep.
You know, what is, for a marketer, what's that relationship like with the DMP? You know, I mean, for first versus third party data. Like,
Yeah.
how does a marketer bring the DMP in? Should you rely on your demand side partners to do that, or?
No, I mean, that is a strategic decision that needs to live at the enterprise level with the marketer. I really believe that.
Okay.
I mean, their data is their power. And so that's something that I talk to marketers about all the time. But when you ask me, what is a marketer doing with the DMP? The short answer is, right now, not much. I mean, mostly it's at the point where marketers are RFIing, you know, or they're getting the contract through legal. So there aren't too many deployed DMP relationships out there. That's not to say there's none. There definitely, I wrote a whole case study about HP and their use of Blue Kai. But generally, it's more like a tremendous amount of interest, a tremendous amount of excitement. We're not quite there yet.
There's also a lot of flavors of DMPs,
That's
right?
absolutely true.
Because if you listen to all of them and their positioning and their sales pitch,
they all sort of, they had a point of origin that maybe was yield optimization, that then, now they're a DMP, and I think that's one of the reasons this place is so confusing.
I think so too, I do. I mean, I've sort of, took me a while to figure this out, but really what it comes down to, and now this is how I talk about it, is there are two kind of primary use cases. The first, which is really where a lot of the DMPs, live, is a digital media use case. It's about digital media insights and analytics and digital media deployment, particularly display. And then you have what marketers are super excited about kind of at the enterprise level, which is universal view of user. And that really is, how do I make every touch point with a user more relevant? And to me, that's a much bigger problem and a lot harder to solve. And there are many fewer companies that are really, truly able to do that right now.